Okay, welcome everyone. This is the kickoff presentation of a very active Open Educational Week schedule that we have planned over the next 5 days, and somewhere in the order of 20 presentations. This is largely going to be a presentation discussing the general overview of the LibreVerse, which is the ecosystem of technologies underlying the LibreTexts project. I tend to like to converse with my audience, especially if they're students. You're not students, but I understand that there's something to be gained in order to be able to converse as we move along instead of waiting to the end for any sort of presentations and such. So feel free to chime in if you have a question or concern, or throw it into the chat and Jennifer can monitor it in order to get us going. So let's get things going here. Before I start introducing myself and where we come from in the LibreText infrastructure, it's useful in order to emphasize a single URL. So there are lots of URLs as part of our overall project. It can get daunting keeping track of one versus the other. So as I tell my students, this is the only thing I want you to write down if you're going to be writing down anything, and it is this URL specifically. So it's launchpad.libretext.org. That right there is a map that looks at the entire LibreVerse and gives you an overall overview of everything that's part of the LibreVerse. It looks something like this, and if you guys have interest and we have time, I can certainly go through it real time. And it basically has a series of applications that are part of the LibreVerse, including libraries down below, which are independently operating wikis that store the textbook material that's out there. So again, while each of them have their own URLs, it is this URL that's most important for being able to access it. You can access this Launchpad anywhere in the LibreVerse, any of our technologies, by clicking on a little rocket ship icon if you see the rocket ship anywhere. So if you get lost, you can click on this and it goes straight to this overview. So in talking about the LibreTexts project, invariably I have to talk a bit about who I am and where I come from. So I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. I've been here since 2005, so I'm about to celebrate my 15-year birthday or anniversary. My research focus has been on ultrafast laser spectroscopies and photoactive biological systems. I shoot very short laser pulses in order to proteins and see how they respond. However, while I enjoyed talking about that, that's not the point of this conversation. You're here and more interested about the other project that I've been doing for the last now 16 years. I'm the founder and director of the LibreTexts project. It was established in 2008, then as the ChemWiki, which is an open pedagogy-based project for using students constructively in order to build alternatives to then general chemistry, and then expanded into other forms of chemistry, and then ultimately all types of fields that the LibreText addresses. I'm the founder of the UC Davis Aggie Open project, which is the OER program on campus. I'm an adopter of OER. I'm an adapter of OER. I'm a creator of OER, and I'm a curator of OER. In fact, I have not used OER in a classroom for the last 9 years. And the reason I emphasize this aspect is that the perspective that we have, which pervades all of the LibreText personnel and contributors, is that as practitioners. So not only do we talk the talk and tell people what they want to do, we actually walk the walk. And it's that perspective that underlies the way we view OER as a whole. There are other perspectives out there that are not necessarily inferior, including librarian perspectives or vendor perspectives, administrators' perspectives and such, but it's just that the perspective that we address, because we are faculty, is in the classroom activity and its practical manifestation of doing things. So why do I do what I do? Well, I do what I do because of this Denny's restaurant, which is 196th Street Southwest, Linwood, Washington. Zip code was 956. No, that's not the right zip code. 98037. Even though I've left Seattle 3 decades ago, I still remember the zip code. And this specific truck that used to be parked behind this Denny's. And it's important because I used to live in this truck when I was in high school, in junior high, and even in elementary school. This truck or versions of this truck. So I grew up somewhat homeless, not exclusively homeless, but certainly had issues with insecurity insecurities associated with being able to live. That extended into food, extended to lots of other insecurities. And the key point of this thing is that I'm driven in order to pursue the mechanisms in order to get people out of this level of poverty. And what got me out of this poverty was affordable education. And that was at K-12, that was at a community college, that was a university, and I even went to part of graduate work at a public university. And naturally, as I mentioned before, I'm now a faculty member at a public university in California. The problem that we have, for those who have been in academia for a while, have recognized this, is that education is slowly becoming not affordable. And while I don't have the position in order to influence tuition and other issues that are actually quite pricey, I do, because of academic freedom, have the ability in order to control the costs of the resources in my class, aka textbooks and other ancillary materials. And it's that empowerment that actually pursues, or that drives what I do, and underlies most of the rest of the team that's on my project in order to do so, although they may not necessarily have such a more personal issue or story connected to poverty. So this is the mission statement that I oftentimes like to give out when I'm giving my presentations. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that's comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. So each of these bolded words are particularly important in terms of defining who we are and how we're moving forward. And each of the words that are in the parentheses are important in terms of applying the manifestation of how we're addressing what we actually build and what we want to be able to target. So I want to address these things quickly before we start to evolve into or progress into more detailed discussion. So community means anybody and everybody who wants to contribute to our corpus of content. That means us, that means the development team, that means students, that means faculty, it means you, and anyone who's watching this or a video. We don't take a one-size-fits-all approach. That is, we don't take an infrastructure where we create a resource and then share the resource, and that resource is the only resource that you have available. You have to take it or leave it type of thing. We facilitate a community. OER can be defined in a variety of different ways, and I don't want to go into the conversation or that aspect of the conversation here. I'm just going to say that it means free. It's free for students in order to access. It's free for faculty in order to be able to customize for their specific needs. There are obviously more issues associated with defining OER than that, but that's the point that's important for this conversation. Comprehensive. So while the LibreTexts project was born out of a chemistry project, it expanded over the last 16 years into other physical sciences, and then into the other STEM fields, and then the physical sciences, and then ultimately to all of academia. So we have an interest in order to pursue a no gap left behind policy. In other words, if it is interested in academia and education, we have an interest in order to address it within our infrastructure. In order to address that, we have multiple libraries where each library focuses on a specific field. We have 16 libraries. We're also interested in this from a vertical perspective, so from the K-12 level all the way up to the graduate level. So there are lots of area in order to cover there. We're interested in being as comprehensive as possible in terms of filling in those gaps or helping to facilitate the distribution of content, of OER content to the community. We also facilitate or pursue a no tech left behind policy. Essentially, as emerging technologies become available, we'll integrate it into our ecosystem of technologies so that faculty and students can use those materials without having to learn about the issues associated with implementing them. So the argument is that technology is integral to the way that we operate with OER, and advancing that technology to as state-of-the-art as possible within, again, the open source criterion is a key component of how we behave, because ultimately we feel that we're building or want to build the textbooks of the future. It's a textbook of engagement. It's a textbook of technology. The rest of the rest of the book and when it's going to be formulated depends to be seen, because it's, again, the future. And lastly, is that the content that we have, the OER infrastructure, has to be stored within a technology that facilitates curation. In other words, we want to have a dynamic living library, not a static repository of content, because everything needs to be updated, everything needs to be curated, everything needs to be customized to specific faculty and specific needs, because no one textbook fits the need of every faculty member. I oftentimes liken this to the argument that no faculty member is 100% happy with their textbook, even if they actually wrote the textbook, because they oftentimes are influenced by external factors like educators and such in order to do so. So I liken our infrastructure not as a repository, but as a curatatory. Now, I'm the only one who uses that term, but it's essentially arguing that we want to have an infrastructure that's continually updating, continually moving forward, and you need to be able to facilitate that, not just something like a pile of PDFs that you want to be able to distribute. That is a repository that has limited impact from a curation perspective. So, in short, the scope of what we want to be able to address within the LibreTexts project is to address everything that is responsible for reducing the affordable education in the classroom. So that includes the textbooks, that includes the homework, includes ancillary materials, includes question banks, includes everything that commercial publishers provide to faculty. And oftentimes many aspects of what they provide would fall into a golden handcuffs argument. The faculty get connected, they get embedded into their technology, into their homework infrastructure, and it becomes difficult in order to extricate them from that technology, because you need to provide the textbook, the homework system, the ancillary materials, the PowerPoint slides, the question banks. You need to have a very expansive perspective off of there, and focusing on one specific thing, focusing on textbooks, focusing on homework, focusing on PowerPoint can be useful in order to advance that, but doesn't address our needs in order to be able to do a full scale switch over off of that. So in short, we're trying to break the golden handcuffs that commercial publishers use in order to tie faculty into their commercial products. So several definitions of note. We oftentimes like to use the word Libre to describe a branding of various aspects of our project. We use the term LibreTexts as the brand name of the entire effort, or our project, or our team, or our not-for-profit company. However, the ecosystem of technologies, what people use in order to interact with our product or our activities, is the LibreVerse. And it's a practical manifestation, again, of this effort. It involves multiple technologies, because no one technology is able to handle each of the aspects that we want to be able to address: the textbooks, the homeworks, the PowerPoint presentations, and such. And we wanted to be able to keep this ecosystem of different technologies all within a central not necessarily corpus, but a center that you're able to access. And again, this is what the launchpad, that URL that I started the conversation with, gives you access to. The LibreNet is sometimes bounces around, and that is our consortium of either campuses, states, systems, districts that can use in order to join and help to advance our project. It's a consortium-based model because we are a not-for-profit entity. We care about mission over money. And I encourage people, in order to compare money and resources between the LibreVerse and the LibreTexts Creator Project with other projects that are out there. Then occasionally, and we've been trying to reduce that, remove the term Libre, or we have used Libre around other types of technologies to designate a specific application for us compared to other things. For example, we will introduce the comments on Conductor in a moment. I will talk about it. And we sometimes used to refer to it as the Libre Commons, because we had one that was centered on specific campuses versus one that was internalized for just our project, or the Libre Studio, or anything like that. Again, we're trying to downgrade that and try to minimize the use of Libre for just a handful of specific terms. So what is the LibreVerse? So from a topical perspective of how it's constructed, it's meant in order to address three primary foci. One is as a construction platform, one is as a dissemination platform, and the other one as a learning platform. So the construction platform is where authors can come in and build the OER, whether it has to be textbook, homework assessments, question banks, and other things, and store them and use them effectively. It's a very powerful construction platform. We're very happy with what it's able to do. And we've had thousands and thousands of people who've been using it over the last 16 years. As a dissemination platform, that's more for students and administrators in order to capitalize centralized on the resources that are created. We're the largest central repository of textbook OER material out there. We have somewhere in the order of about 950,000 pages of content, so close to 1 million. Since we started in 2008, we distributed 1.2 billion, that's with a B, page views to the students of the world. It makes us the most popular OER project in terms of activity and usage that's out there. So we operate at an enterprise level, but it also means that if anyone has any OER that they want to contribute to our project, by doing so, you essentially expand out the scope of impact for that project far more than what any other infrastructure is able to provide out there. Lastly is as a learning platform. So this is more student focused, and it's recognizing that not only are we interested in being able to generate OER and distribute it, we want to be able to provide an environment for students to use that OER constructively in order to advance their learning, because learning is ultimately the criterion that we want to use for success. And in order to do that, we want to be able to not just optimize the resource for learning, but implement additional technologies like analytics that are able to guide our use of resources, evaluation of the efficacy of our resources, and provide a metric in order to give you quantified impact of what's being created. That's just one aspect of other components of the learning platform aspect of the LibreVerse. But because we are embedded into academia, we recognize it's actually learning that is the final goal, not necessarily creating or distributing OER. So that is sort of the preamble. The rest of this discussion is going to be focusing on the LibreVerse and different parts of the LibreVerse and what it's able to do. Now, it's actually generally a situation that after I'm done going through the LibreVerse, after a 1-hour presentation, it can be very daunting in order to try to incorporate everything into people's brains and such like that. So the upshot that I'm trying to say is I'm going to be throwing a lot of things out here. And if something doesn't actually resonate, that's perfectly fine. The goal that we have is to try to make at least one thing really resonate with every attendee in order to be able to grab something and move forward, and then get exposed to all the other aspects associated with the LibreVerse. Again, because our scope is very comprehensive, again, textbooks, homework, ancillary materials, facilitated authoring, facilitated dissemination, learning, analytics, etc. There's a lot on the plate that we're presenting here for people to access. So let's talk about the libraries to begin with. So the libraries of the LibreVerse are our hub. Those are the ones that hold our textbook material. We have ancillary technologies around the libraries that we'll be discussing in turn. So the libraries are independent wikis that host content. Now, we chose wiki technology because it was the best technology for a large-scale collaborative construction effort when we started this project back in 2008. It's still the best technology for a large-scale collaborative construction effort now in 2024. You can think of Wikipedia as an example in order to do that, in order to facilitate widespread construction, widespread dissemination, widespread authoring, and widespread curation. Now, the library and the way that we actually approached the library it is addressed or is a manifestation the fragmentation of OER. So this is a slide that I created about 6 to 7 years ago, and it's equally applicable now as it was back then. And the argument here is that anyone who gets into the OER universe recognizes relatively quick that the OER universe is fragmented, meaning that you could find content in a variety of different sources, or you could find links to content from different sources. For example, the Open Textbook Library, which is more of a library guide than a library because it's a referatory and it doesn't actually host the content, gives you access or gives you links to various content and being able to find OER in different spots. OER Commons, mostly referatory, although it has repository capabilities, is similarly gives you links to different things. OpenStax, it's a repository that hosts content, but it's not curated content. Let me phrase that. It's not continually updated by the community. It's not customizable. It's all internalized, and it's the one-size-fits-all approach that they distribute. Merlot is a repository, referatory, Open Sunny, Galileo, Open Oregon, Nova, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Saylor, California State University System, Oregon State University, and numerous other repositories, referatories, library guides, and even individual faculty computers on individual offices and individual campuses across the country and even the globe. There's OER a variety of different places, and it can be very daunting in order to find that. It can be very daunting in order to remix it, in other words, to capitalize on the OE and OER and bring the content together into building a new infrastructure. And there are two approaches in order to be able to handle this sort of fragmented infrastructure. One is to make it so everyone operates on a central standard that's able to communicate with each other effectively. That's a federated based approach, and that will never happen just because of the distribution and getting everyone on board and things like that. So the approach that we took, again, 16 years ago, is a centralized approach. In other words, take OER, capitalize again on the O and OER, and bring that OER into a central repository, our wikis, such that it could facilitate the goals that we want to be able to do, like what I mentioned, do in my mission statement. So in short, we're building a bigger and better bucket of Legos. And the process of taking OER from other repositories or other faculty members that have constructed them and share it with us is harvesting. And harvesting is not just a simple importing, it's importing and doing a variety of other components to it in order to standardize the content to facilitate better remixing. Because anyone who's ever tried to cut and paste from a PDF understands having content in different formats can oftentimes be really quite difficult in order to be able to bring things together in order to make a final product. So the goal off of here is to try to bring everything together into a bigger bucket of Legos so that the faculty member, in this case here, the student, or not the student, the child, is able to build their own book as quickly, as effectively, and limited only by their imagination, if that bucket is as big as possible. And that's how we've actually been pursuing this for the last handful of years. This is why we have close to 1 million pages of content into our corpus. So this provides an infrastructure that's centralized for finding content. It standardizes the content to facilitate better remixing. It makes it so you can interconvert the content. You can build collections, aka books or mini repositories. It provides maximal flexibility. It also provides maximal curatability. In short, you're able to update a specific page, and then everyone can benefit from that updating, rather than having things decentralized, and then one campus may update a book, but the other campus doesn't know that that has been updated. So we have a situation where we're doing two steps forward and one step back, all again because of this fragmented infrastructure. So several years ago, we recognized that we had a lot of content, but we needed to be able to facilitate a mechanism in order to allow faculty or authors in order to remix that content effectively. So we introduced the Remixer. The Remixer is one of our core technologies, and it's actually a relatively simple technology that's just a graphical interface such that you have access to these close to 1 million pages of content on the left-hand side. You're building a book on the right-hand side, and you just drag and drop. It's a pretty straightforward approach. We'll be discussing this in detail later on in the Open Ed week, which Jennifer can hopefully paste a link up here so you can actually take a look at our schedule. And it provides, and the Remixer provides a simplified mechanism in order to get authors in order to capitalize on this large corpus of content. It's not everything, but it does provide a valuable mechanism in order to be able to remix effectively using, again, these standardized content that we've stored within our libraries. Each of our libraries is focused in, or has three principal components. It has the campus bookshelves, the centralized bookshelves, and the learning objects. The centralized bookshelves are the books that we curate, not necessarily that we build, although we do build content. We have a construction effort within our scope. But it's the content that we curate, we update, and it provides stability. So it's the power of the centralized infrastructure that we have in place. The books that are in the campus bookshelves are organized around different campuses, and each campus, irrespective of whether they join the LibreNet or not, can get their own campus bookshelf up there, and they can store up to 5 books without even joining the LibreNet. The books that are stored in the bookshelves are curated by the campus themselves, and it provides the opportunity for them to customize their own books in order to suit their own needs. They could curate them. We don't typically get involved in curating the content in the campus bookshelves, with the exception of running bots, which I'll talk about in a moment, in order to be able to update accessibility issues, because we want things to be standardized so that when a resource is in the campus bookshelves, other faculty and other campuses can use those resources. Again, capitalizing on the sharing is caring model that underlies OER. Learning objects is content that's stored or not organized around books, but organized around repositories or mini repositories. For example, in chemistry, that's where you can go in and find labs, organic chemistry labs, inorganic chemistry labs, physical chemistry labs, and such. They're not typically organized around a single book, but it gives you the ability in order to do searches of those repositories and then use them constructively in terms, again, to customize learning manuals, lab manuals, or other resources within the campus bookshelves. The upshot off of this approach is that we have the power and the fidelity associated with the centralized approach in the centralized bookshelves, but the flexibility available to the decentralized approach within the campus bookshelves. And it's that interplay that makes this an exceedingly powerful based approach. So there are lots of aspects in terms of authoring books that we've implemented into our infrastructure. One that I'm particularly happy in order to talk about is our auto attribution. So as many of you may be aware of, when you get involved into the open community and typically using Creative Commons licensing, there's a variety of complexities involved in using licensing, remixing licensing, updating content, and collecting content from different licenses together. Now, that's not even a topic of this discussion. It's a topic of a week-long conversation behind it. But what we've introduced into our library is an auto attribution feature. In other words, every paragraph, every block that we have is essentially spray painted with a code that tells you where it comes from, that allows you to copy that page, I'm afraid that block, from one page to another page. And when you do so, it will then keep the attributions and the licensing requirement for that block. So this is an example of a bottom of a page that shows you that content came from a different source. It came from this license, is anonymous. This is this page with this title, this name shows as anonymous, this license, and if there's attribution of a source, that will also introduce the source off of there. That provides an exceedingly easy infrastructure in order to ensure compliance from a licensing perspective. And that's exceedingly important. And the nice thing about this is not done necessarily at the page level, it's done at the block level. So if you have content from different sources that you all paste on the same page, it will actually highlight the individual components and show you the licensing associated with that. We're very excited about this, and we're excited in order to update this to have more logic in order to be able to argue when you're allowed to change licensing and when you're not. So this is still off the presses. And we'll be talking about this tomorrow. We have a collaboration with Sandbox AQ, which is a for-profit enterprise spun out of Alphabet and Google. They do AI, and they're basically working with us in order to make it so that the corpus of content that we have, which is an exceedingly large OER corpus, is available to be digested and implemented into a tutor that can be accompanying the textbook. Again, this is part of the textbook of the future, a textbook of engagement and such. The one thing that I will mention off of here, which I skipped over here, is that because we are academics, we have an interest in order to make sure that not only are we trying to reduce hallucinations, which is the term for incorrect responses from these large language models, and we have approaches in order to address that. If people are interested, I can go into details, but we also have an interest in order to make sure that we have appropriate references of where the content comes from, and we'll also have appropriate attributions for the content that is used in terms of these responses. The intent ultimately is that when you have a book and you upload a book to our corpus, it gets folded into the large language model dynamically, because of the approach that we're using, what's called a RAG, or a retrieval augmented generation infrastructure, that makes it faster to update than a large language model like ChatGPT. This will also be folded into our homework infrastructure, which I'll talk about momentarily, because we want to have a centralized approach in order to facilitate, again, greater engagement, greater learning with the resources that we have that's out there. Okay. We have a variety of different mechanisms that we use to distribute content. Like I mentioned, we're the most popular OER repository in terms of accessing content list textbooks. We haven't beaten Wikipedia yet, and it'll probably be a long time before we do. But we can also distribute content as printed books. For example, this general chemistry book costs about $12. This was purchased before the pandemic, so it's probably about $14, $15 now for students to access if they want a physical copy of it. So we act as an intermediary between a print-on-demand printer and the student and faculty that wants to purchase this book. We implement this at cost, so it provides the opportunity that we can distribute these books even if they have non-commercial clauses associated with them. So we're in full compliance with the licensing that's involved in that. We can generate downloadable PDFs. You can embed your books into learning management systems via common cartridge. You could generate the print files if you want individual PDFs to do some offline remixing capabilities. We will release EPUB 3 export. We've been working on this for a while, somewhere near the end of spring. I mentioned physical books. We can load up Raspberry Pi boxes with our libraries. And soon we're going to be able to implement something similar onto phones. So you can download an entire library, for example, the medicine library, the health library, onto your book, and you can do onto your phone, and you can do a search off of that. We call that LibreText in a phone. LibreText in a box is the Raspberry hotspot. Sorry, it's a hotspot that's connected to Raspberry Pi boxes. This was pursued in order to advance education in developing countries, but it was clear during the pandemic that there were many populations in America that had limited access to high-speed internet, either due to infrastructure not being in place or due to lack of financial resources in order to tap into that approach. And these offline options provide a mechanism for us to address the education of those students. These numbers are a little bit old, but we've distributed somewhere in the order of 10,000 PDFs per week, and the number of physical books we've distributed somewhere in the order of 10,000 since we started the project. Jupyter Notebook System. And now this is a component of the LibreVerse that is more applicable to the STEM fields, especially the physical STEM fields. And the Jupyter infrastructure provides the opportunity in order to take and embed into a book executable code. So as a chemist and as a physical chemist, I'm particularly interested in order to introduce coding to students so students can actually see and understand how to code. This is an example of a Python code that's embedded into my textbook, such as students can actually interact with the code and rerun it, and they can use it as widgets in order to be able to learn, in this case here, particle in a box, quantum mechanical problems and such. And this can expand to a wide variety of different applications. You can not only use Python, you can use R, which is for MATLAB, which is a substitute for MATLAB. So Octave is a substitute MATLAB, R, C++, and actually 30 other languages, and most of those languages, to be honest, I've never heard of before. This is, again, an exceedingly important component in terms of building the textbook of the future, especially for physical sciences. The benefit associated with capitalizing on the community and when people generate something you're able to distribute is essentially not just useful for building up books, but it's also useful for code. For example, this was an example of someone who presented on Twitter, which I refuse to call X, dealing with distillation that he used for his general chemistry class. I liked it. He shared me the code. I integrated it into the Jupyter Notebook system, into a book so that students can engage with this widget in their reading, not just basically having a static reading. Anything that facilitates greater engagement typically will facilitate greater learning. So again, capitalizing on the OER. The bot server is not a front-end tool, but it's worthwhile in order to emphasize because it's something that we use in order to curate. Again, we take curation very seriously. Like I said, we view our corpus as a curatatory, not just a repository of content that the buck stops at publishing. The buck does not stop at publishing, as anyone in academia knows. So what we have behind the scenes is a series of bots. Bots are tools or scripts that will go through page by page and change things on the page. And that makes it easier for post-editing changes that are important in order to facilitate centralized standardization or to update accessibility, or for a wide range of other things that are out there. You can think of it as a global find and replace, but exceedingly powerful out there. There are actually two bots that we use, the Brad bot and the accessibility bot, or we call it the Ali bot, because A11Y is shortened for accessibility. The accessibility bot goes through and updates content as that people have written in order to try to bring it up to WCAG 2.1 compatibility, because teaching authors in order to write in an accessible manner can be a really time-consuming process. If you're able to move some of that to a bot in order to facilitate that, it can help to co-write that's out there. The second one, the Brad bot, goes in and updates the standardization, the style, making everything pretty. It's named after Brad Pitt because Brad Pitt is pretty. I mentioned accessibility. We take accessibility very seriously. We need to make sure that we have full effort in order to facilitate accessibility. In this case here, WCAG compatibility. We use 2.1 for text, organization, videos, homework, interactive elements, and everything else. The issue, author, is because we have a wide spread of different parts of different technologies and different OERs, textbooks, homework, things like that. There's a lot of different technologies or different approaches that we use in order to facilitate compliance with accessibility. We take it very seriously. The bots are one example in order to address that. We provide guidance in order to facilitate effective construction of these other approaches off of here. One example of this is in real-time co-authoring, where when you're constructing content on our libraries, the author can click a button and it will do a review. It only grabs the top 10 biggest issues of WCAG, including headings and other things, and it'll go and review the pages of content in order to identify if something's not compliant, provide an example about why it should be compliant, and provide even a quick fix in order to be able to address it. So the key point is in order to support authors in order to generate accessible content while they're writing, while the bots do it after the fact. And I encourage anyone in order to get an account on us in order to be able to take a look at this code that's there. This right here is an extra slide that shouldn't be there. So that right there is a general overview of the textbooks, the content that's stored on our libraries. Now I want to transition to a different technology, the Commons and Conductor. The Commons and Conductor is a newer component of the LibreVerse. It's a very peculiar name because the name comes from the fact that you can view the Commons on the front end without signing in. You can also view the Conductor, which is the back end, which requires signing in. So we have these two sides associated with this Commons and Conductor, which is why we actually name it like that. Like I mentioned, the Commons is a front-end cataloging system where you can catalog books, you can look through libraries, you can look through collections, you can look through homework sets. You can even find out what resources are under development in order to make it so that people don't have to recreate the wheel. Because unfortunately, right now we have far too many projects that are recreating the wheel in the OER landscape, whether they happen to be in the same campus, the same state, same country, or even in the world. And if we can centralize that to provide a mechanism for people to know what other people are doing, it can help in order to not waste our resources. We have two flavors of the Commons. One is the Libre Commons, which again is the term that we're using for our central instance. We just call it Commons nowadays. And the Campus Commons, which is a Commons dedicated to a specific campus, and each LibreNet member gets their own Campus Commons. So you can think of it as a catalog for that campus. But it's a catalog that's more than just homework. It's a catalog for assets and a catalog for other components. And I can show you a snapshot of it in a moment. The Conductor is the backend, requiring an account in order to sign into. Jennifer mentioned a link in the chat. If you don't have an account with us, you can go to there and request an account. Once we've verified the account, you then have access to the back end of the Conductor. The Conductor is a project management tool built around OER. Anyone in the OER community can use the Conductor to facilitate OER construction. However, it's well organized in order to capitalize on textbooks that are stored on our libraries the LibreText libraries, but you can use it outside of our LibreText libraries. If you did it on Pressbooks, it's equally fine. You'll make me cry, but it's still perfectly fine in order to be able to use the Conductor for doing that, or for any other project that may not be textbook related, that you want to be able to organize it, like organize a team for doing homework construction. We use the Conductor in order to organize our workshops, and I can show you different examples of that if people are interested after we're done here. It's backend, which means that you need an account in order to access. It's a project building tool. It gives you the ability in order to set alerts. So if you come in and say something like chemistry is an alert, so any resource that comes into our platform from anywhere within our sphere of influence that has chemistry associated, I'll get an email telling me about that. It makes it easier if I'm creating a resource in order to know if there's additional resources that are coming in that I didn't know about before I started. Gives you the ability in order to request harvest. That's basically saying you find an OER or you have an OER and you want to give it to us, subject to, again, compliance with the licensing off of there. We're happy in order to harvest it, standardize it, applies accessibility approaches to it. We don't do a full accessibility review of that because that takes a bit of time, but we do a really decent overview of that. Again, because we care about the content itself. It's not just a platform for storage. We actually want to curate and move things forward. Facilitates handling adoptions, not just requests, but self-registered adoptions of the resources. It has analytics infrastructure. It facilitates peer review, communication, both intra-team and inter-team. You can look at progress on any other project on the intranet, on our infrastructure. This right here is a snapshot of the Prince George Community College branded campus catalog, which shows some of the resources that they have. At the time, there were only 61 OER resources, which was pretty decent start for an OER project. Again, this acts as a central catalog, so the stakeholders, whether they have students, faculty, administrators, external reviewers or whatever, can come in and see these are the OER resources that are used by this resource and move forward instead of making it difficult in order to be able to find that. This has been expanded since I took a snapshot out here in order to be able to not just show textbooks, but to also show assets. So when you actually have someone upload PowerPoint files for a book, you can do a search and find those PowerPoint files in order to accompany it, and any other assets that may be connected to a specific book. This is a better branded snapshot. This is of Kansas State University, which is one of our inaugural LibreNet campuses. And it has, again, a little bit of branding, a little bit of purple accents and things like that, and a few books that are related down here that you can access. The backend cataloging system looks like this. We've actually updated it since I took a snapshot of this, but it again provides an infrastructure to facilitate updating a resource, communication threads. You can provide Gantt plots. You can upload assets and other things like that. An exceedingly powerful project management tool, again, focused around OER. To my knowledge, is the only OER project management tool out there available. I should mention all these things are open source, that you can grab them off of our GitHub repository. Okay, forums. I don't want to talk too much about forums because we're going to be merging forums into our Commons Conductor, but we have a mechanism in order to facilitate community conversation around specific topics, whether they happen to be curation efforts or general construction efforts or just assistance on different aspects of the LibreVerse. We have a chat, Discord chat room. You can access it at chat.libretext.org. Many of our student developers and many of our faculty are on here. So if you want to get faster feedback, you can go about doing that, but it's not entirely reliable. It depends on who's in the chat room and who's able to facilitate that. I will mention, even though I don't have a snapshot of here, we just released about a week ago a support center ticketing system that provides the opportunity for people to provide feedback in order for us to address different issues, whether it's curating a content or technology issues or account access or other things like that. And that's going to be available. That is available on the launch pad, that URL I showed you at the beginning. Project Solo. We actually rebranded this into Nova, and it is a repository not of textbooks or of homework or other things like that. It's actually a repository of courses. And the intent off of that is to provide something akin to Canvas Commons, where you can store courses and you could dump the entire course and import them with the benefits of connecting it to a homework infrastructure so you can actually bring it all in. The reason that we don't fold this into Canvas Commons or any other LMS's infrastructure is that there are multiple LMSs that are used out there. And in order to download from Canvas Commons, you need to get an account, typically as a member of a campus that has paid for access to or for maintaining Canvas. Second one is not only just the impact, because there's a lot of people who need this access but don't have Canvas, is that learning management systems come and learning management systems go. And that means that campuses that have Canvas at some point are going to give up Canvas and adopt a new learning management system, perhaps based around AI or something like that. So by untethering ourselves to a learning management system provides great flexibility. We're going to be releasing this in more detail. Well, release more detail about it within the next month or so. We're going to use this for professional development, for training, for different aspects of mastering the LibreVerse. Again, it's going to be an exceedingly powerful approach, so we're very happy with it. And it's all open source. You can download it. Adapt. So Adapt is probably what many people are interested in at this week's conversations of presentations at Open Ed Week. And Adapt is our homework infrastructure. And we've been wanting to build homework for, well, almost since the beginning, the last 15 years within our infrastructure. And the issues that we had with doing so that oftentimes failed in our partnerships with different organizations in order to do that is that homework is a complicated approach, a complicated system. It requires a lot of infrastructure in order to be able to handle, in order to do well, in order to be able to handle the traits that we want to be able to pursue required a bit of effort. So we want something to be flexible, dynamic, comprehensive, integratable, LMS agnostic, powerful, and free or nearly free. And those were the criteria that we wanted to do in terms of building or address in order to pursue our homework system. And the answer in terms of how you actually build something like that is essentially slowly and efficiently. And it's only relatively recently, thanks to funds from the California Education Learning Lab, which is the primary sponsor for building the ADAPT homework system. We also received funds from the U.S. Department of Education, the open textbook pilot that we were the inaugural winners of that award back in 2018. And the idea behind building a homework system is that it is not OER necessarily, although that's a component of that. It is open source technology. And the version of OER in programming is open source, where you can commandeer other people's content freely with permission and integrate it into it. So we want to not reinvent the wheel. So we've done that. We're very happy with that. You can access the ADAPT infrastructure again on our Launchpad, or if you decide, you can go to adapt.libretext.org. And the idea behind ADAPT is flexibility. So questions can either be open-ended or they can be auto-graded, where open-ended require a human or a grader in order to evaluate it. Students can submit rich text, plain text, audio files. This is useful for not recording audio for second language development, files, PDF, Excel, images, and such like that. The key point is that this requires review of after submission. We have a nice infrastructure in place. We call it the Open Grader. It's very similar to many learning management systems grading infrastructure. Canvas calls their Easy Grader. It looks similar to Gradescope, for example. But most of our effort has not been on open-ended questioning infrastructure. It's been focusing on auto-graded capabilities. So what we did when we started this project is we recognized that no one technology is able to address all the different aspects that we wanted to be able to address, which is all of academia. So in other words, a resource that's good for languages is not necessarily well suited for math. And one that's well suited for math is not necessarily well suited for social sciences. So you need to have the flexibility in order to benefit from individual resources that are open source, but also being able to sidetrack deficiencies because each technology has its own benefits off of that. To that end, we've addressed 4 principal components or technologies into Adapt. One is web work, which is a technology that came out, at least initially, from upstate New York, the University of Rochester, that Mike Gage and then expanded out to other people implemented. It's a very powerful infrastructure centered around math and engineering, especially in use in R1 institutions and especially upper divisional classes. iMathAS is the technology underlying MyOpenMath, which is also a math-based focus with a scope that extends to engineering and other number-based things. It's a technology underlying also OHM, which is a for-profit homework infrastructure from Lumen Learning, and XYZ Homework, which is also a for-profit infrastructure, even though the technology is open source. H5P is the third technology within our infrastructure. It's a more graphical infrastructure. It's gotten quite popular in the last 10 years in the open community. And lastly, we have native, which is our term of technology embedded into Adapt, its core component, and that includes the questioning type that's in learning management systems, what's called QTI, or question and test interoperability. So most question banks in learning management systems, with the exception of Moodle, will use QTI that we can then integrate into our platform. We've also partnered with the technical colleges in Wisconsin in order to expand Adapt to handle the next generation nursing technologies. That's NextLex. I think I got that acronym incorrect, but it requires a very unique type of questioning to be implemented into our approach. And to our knowledge, we're the only open source version that provides that technology available. This is the application of, in this case, here's a snapshot of my courses that have been using Adapt since 2021, or actually 20, I think is when we started it. So Adapt is built for multimodal use. Students can access their homework via Adapt directly, going to the Adapt website. You can embed Adapt questions into your textbook, either formatively or summatively. Formatively means that the students don't need to sign in order to be able to get the answers from them. Summative means that they need to sign in, and essentially the textbook becomes the homework system. And again, this gets back into the argument that the textbook of the future is a textbook of engagement. And if you can provide the homework as a mechanism in order to facilitate greater engagement between the students and the textbook, you invariably increase the learning that's out there. However, there is no study out there to demonstrate that this modality is better than this modality. I'm particularly interested in order to address that sometime in the near future. We have a phone infrastructure that people can download. We haven't released it to our stores, our free Google Store and iPlay Store, or whatever iPhones call it, but essentially acts as a mechanism so that students use the technology that they're native with, because 50% of the students that access our textbooks access the students through their phone. So you can remove the barrier in order to facilitate greater engagement between the student and the homework, then more likely for them to actually do the homework. However, this technology can also substitute as an in-class clicker system, and not just substitute as clicker, but also to knock out the costs associated with clickers, which are somewhere in the order of $35 to $45 per student per term, which can oftentimes be comparable to the homework system that we're being able to complement. And lastly, all these modalities can pass grades back to a learning management system once we've actually set up that learning management system's bridge to Adapt, typically via LTI, although we have a more powerful API, different mechanism for coupling in to Canvas in order to make this a single button integration rather than a more painful manual integration of content. So we have just a few minutes left. I oftentimes go through this little mini video of accessing this native homework app, in this case here on an iPhone. This was created via partners at the University of Arkansas Little Rock. We're very excited about this. I just wanted to show you a quick snapshot of the actual question. It's right here. So this is using an H5P question. So any H5P question or any other technology you want to use auto-graded technology, mostly auto-graded, can be embedded into the phone app in order to be able to provide this. The nice thing about hooking it into the phone app, it provides an opportunity for students to also use the camera on the phone app. So if they need to upload a snapshot or a picture of their work or their application or something else, they can do that natively. And that will provide an opportunity for us to then start to add machine learning in order to update drawings and pictures and equations and chemical equations into their functional alternative on our side. So in other words, students can draw a picture of a molecule, it will scan it in and create the molecule on our side, and that can be used in order to do homework in organic chemistry, which is a key component of our first year of our grant with the state of California. Adapt has the name Adapt because it has some adaptive learning capabilities. So instead of providing homework just as a traditional fashion with here's a course has an assignment has questions, the questions are open at this day, they're closed at this day, they're graded in this way, something that learning management systems provide, we provide the opportunity in order to generate what we refer to as learning trees. Learning trees are based off of decision trees, which is a simple based adaptive learning approach where instead of providing a black box algorithm based recommender engine, which takes a lot of resources in order to build, a lot of resources to train are oftentimes not terribly good. And they also don't build robust students because learning trees have the opportunity in order to make it so when students fail a question, they can go into a remediation set of nodes, whether they happen to be expositions in order to educate the students, or they happen to be questions in order to evaluate that they understand specific subsections or skills necessary to master that tree. This provides a mechanism in order to act as a virtual tutor, but it provides agency. Now, students are actually engaged in their homework, engaged in their education. And again, when you improve their engagement, you improve their learning. This provides a mechanism in order to facilitate metacognition skills or developing metacognition because the students can identify where they want to go in the range of different skills that they have available to master for the root node. And they also have different mechanisms of exposition. Sometimes they're text, sometimes they're video, sometimes they're Socratic methods. Different students prefer different approaches. And we provide this to students in order to advance their education. And our data shows that this right here is a superior way than just giving a single question, although that's perfectly fine to give single questions if that's what you want to go about doing. We have about 200 questions in general chemistry with the learning trees. However, we're going to be building 500 questions per year for the remainder of our grant. So we'll be making 2,000 more learning trees, focusing predominantly on STEM fields, but this approach can be used in a wide variety of different fields. I will mention that part of the LibreVerse is the Studio, even though it's integrated into Adapt. Studio is our repository of H5P. Everyone who gets an author, a light instructor account can then create H5P automatically. We don't charge anything extra in order to make H5P, to embed H5P into your textbook, or to actually fold it into Adapt. It's not something that we consider to be important in order to charge for. So we have about 22,000 questions right now. Some of them are private. You can go through and peruse these questions. You can grab them and you can use them as you see fit. You can update them, and we're going to be continually expanding the Studio into an exceedingly powerful repository for H5P. Lastly, before I end this thing out, is that we go back to this learning aspect. We want to be able to collect data on how students are interacting with the textbook, how they're interacting with the homework system, or any other components of the LibreVerse, because that data can be useful in order to guide our pedagogy. It can also be useful in order to evaluate the efficacy of what we create, because ultimately what we create needs to be demonstrated as beneficial for learning. That's the criterion that's out there. Pretty is nice, but learning is what really matters off of here. So this is an example of a study that we did where we actually tracked activity on reading the textbook. This was about a decade ago. Here's a reference that we published it off of there. And what we were able to see is that students studied, interestingly, significantly right before the exam. So I had 2 midterms and a final exam. And this by the fact that we were able to track the students, the individual students, we can correlate the fact that the students that cram also perform about 10% poor. Now that may be cause and effect, it may be correlation, but what we want to be able to do is to use that as actionable information to take this traffic and guide a different pedagogy. In this case here, I switched to weekly quizzes instead of midterms in order to get the background up and the amount of cramming or time studying right before the exam down. And I can't compare the results off of here. I need to do a different study, but this did exactly what I wanted to do, and it provided actionable information, and it shows you what you can get when you understand how students are interacting with the textbook. It also provides opportunity in order to evaluate whether the course and the textbook and the homework addresses learning objectives for the class or learning outcomes, depending upon whether they are faculty constructed, department constructed, or externally pushed upon the faculty of the department. But you get detailed information about how students read specific books, and so if you or specific pages. So if you ask students in order to read something, you could tell, are they reading it? So with that being said, I'm going to go back to what I started with, which is our mission statement. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that's comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. Like I mentioned before, it's easy to get daunted about the full scope of everything that the LibreTexts project has been pursuing over the last 16 years. It's because we want to be as comprehensive as possible. We want to be able to get into the classroom and knock out all the things that commercial publishers generate, and they do all these things for faculty. In short, in order to become this golden set of handcuffs for faculty in order to get tied into. I'm going to leave this up here. I can address any questions. These are just basically a simplified steps in order to be able to create a book. But the first step that anyone needs to do is to create an account, and you can access that one.libretext.org. So with that, I will end sort of my formal conversations. If people have questions, concerns, issues, we can have a chat behind it. I'm very excited that you guys stuck around, even though I was a few minutes late off of here. And thank you for your attention.